What are the most common self-limiting beliefs? All beliefs are self-limiting. I've been wanting to give an ironic little sermon on epistemic humility on Quora for a while, and this is my chance, I think. Belief is one of the most misunderstood and misused words that I am aware of on the interwebs. People talk about belief as though it can be separated from what they call truth. And yet, we're all quite aware that the things we believe are the things we consider true. That's why we believe them. But no, truth is not belief. That can't be equated. Because what is true is what's verified by empirical evidence. That's an incredibly ironic thing that I have heard a number of people say in a number of different ways. And it comes down to etymology. Etymology is everything. If we use a word, it is best that we understand where it comes from. Do we know where words come from? Belief is a really interesting one. The English word belief doesn't seem to have a particularly clear etymology at all. Google tells me, because I went looking, I thought to myself, I don't really know myself where I get the word belief from. I'm reasonably good with etymology. And it seems to come from an old English word, geletha, which just means itself. So it seems to be a true tautology in an interesting way, in the same way that veritas and verily are. So when people say that belief can be separated from truth, that if you believe something that's different to a truth, it's executing what is demonstrably a false dichotomy, because the word itself doesn't have a contrasting derivation, and the method, the scientific method that we use to establish the true thing that can be separated from belief is that we verify it by empirical evidence. That's one of my favorite phrases in the world. People have probably heard me explain it before, but veritas just means truth. Empirikos, from which we get empiricism, just means experience. And evidence is literally Latin for clear or transparent. So what we're saying when we say that something is verified by empirical evidence, therefore we believe it, is we're saying it is truthed by my experience being clear. Does that sound like a scientific thing to say? Because that's what we base our beliefs on when we call ourselves rationalists. We take observations of the universe and we correspond them to pictures that we create of their causation. And then we say, yeah, that makes sense, so that's right. How can that be correct? How can our beliefs be separated then from the way things really are, when we decide the way things really are according to our experience of them? It doesn't make sense. It is a terribly ironic tautology. So when we talk about belief and when we talk about the limitations of belief, we're really talking about the limitations of language. We're talking about the way in which we can take information and we can construe it into a form which can be understood, that a form that follows logic. We take data and put it together into an assembly. Matt Acutt has this wonderful theory called datalogical metaphysical theory, which I give him hell about. But it does make sense in a lot of ways. When we consider the world datalogically, when we consider that there are things that are put together and that constitutes the essential nature of the universe, there are things in relationship, and by understanding those things in those relationships, we can understand stuff. That makes sense. That's a good theory. But that's the problem with theories. Mathematics is a theory. Mathematics is a language by which we can describe things in the universe. We can make sense of our observations using the language of mathematics. Can mathematics correspond to itself? Can it verify itself? Is it logically complete? Nope. It's consistent, not complete. And this is the point. Mathematics itself is this wonderful verification of picture theory. Is the picture reality? Can we make the degree of correspondence, the ways in which we can take isomorphisms, things which appear to be the same, shared common properties, and map them onto each other, such that we say this equals that, or this is held in a relationship to that in a certain way that is consistent, that is useful in the way that we make descriptions, that is geometrically true. Well, it can't tell you. We can believe it. We can believe the truths that mathematics tell us via its own operation, but it cannot verify those. And our experience does not verify the method by which that experience is accumulated. And that's the problem. When we say, my experience is clear, therefore this is true, I believe it because it is true. No, it's true because you believe it, and it must be so. Because what you believe is a picture. What you believe is an association of data points drawn together by logic. Literally the basis of geometry in a cognitive form. This is what Wittgenstein says. This is the point that Douglas Hofstadter makes beautifully in his problem of recursion. So when we say it's true because it's true and I believe it because it's true, we're literally conflating two terms without understanding it. And that's the problem of language. Two words can actually signify the same thing. And similarly, something which seems to be differentiated by two different words may not be. That's how irony works. Truth found in falsity and falsity in truth. What's the definition of irony? Look it up. It's beautiful. I'd say to people, the definition of irony proves Russell's paradox. If the definition of irony is ironic, then that's not the definition of irony. And yet, if the definition of irony does clearly indicate that irony can be described apart from other things, then that is ironic. So the point just basically distills to, when we think about the limitations of beliefs, we're talking about the limitations of our method of describing things. So in order to describe that limit, as Wittgenstein says, you need to be able to think of both sides of it. When we draw a circle on a page, you see a circle because you have the internal area and its external context. That's how you can see the shape itself. So when we say that beliefs are limited, how are they limited? Well, they're limited by themselves because that limitation is described by the shape. And yet, we cannot possibly argue that that limitation is inherent in the belief itself. If that were the case, it needs to define its own boundary. Can any belief do that? Can any belief actually speak for itself? No, we can only verify things by empirical evidence. We can only describe the experience that we have found to be clear by the correspondence of that picture to what we interpret as reality. And when we do that, we decide it is verified. We say this is truth. So, all beliefs are self-limiting, and ironically so, because they must fail to describe their own limits. Otherwise, they cannot be described. This is the error that we make when we talk about truth. This is the error that we make when we tell each other, this is the way things are. No, that is the way we see things. My last point, which I've made far too many times, can be made really beautifully in a video. Our vision is holographic. We take a world which appears to be in more than two dimensions, X, Y, Z, and the continuum of time, and we project it onto a two-dimensional retina, or two retinae, such that things that are closer are perceived as being larger, and things that are further away are perceived as being smaller. Here we have a great example of an edge problem. Where are my hands with respect to my face? You actually can't tell the z-axis from looking at this picture. The z-axis is not perceivable because it is directly incident onto the retinae, and the retinae don't have a method of perceiving that axis in perpendicularity. So this really looks like it's bigger when really it's just closer, and this looks like it's smaller, but it's not. These sizes, these geometries remain consistent. It's our method of projection that creates the illusion of change. So as we consider the nature of truth, as we consider the nature of belief, and we consider the nature of limitation, we need to consider our context. My hands no longer exist because they're outside of the limitation of the perspective that we're able to take on this image. But this image only exists because this context produces that perspective. If I were to stand 10 kilometers away, you would not see me because the method of this projection and the resolution of it would result in pixelization, the loss of definition. So as we try and describe beliefs in contrast to truth, we see that pixelization problem. When we pursue the method by which we make that distinction down to its origins, we find that it disintegrates. We end up with nothing. We end up seeing that what we call truth and what we call belief must be the same thing. All beliefs are self-limited.